Hello everyone. Today we're diving down the rabbit hole of 4 unsolved missing persons cases from across Canada. We have a man who went on his lunch break at work only to disappear, to a young woman who left her grandmother's home with friends never to be seen again, to a man who vanished after going out for drinks after work with his manager. And then we have a couple who left on a cross-country road trip across Canada and their last signs of life being a postcard sent from a small town. All of these cases have limited information, but they need to be talked about. Their families need answers. 31-year-old Stacy Lucien DiLenardi, who also went by Luke, grew up in Sudbury, Ontario. In September of 2005, Stacy moved 300 kilometers away for work in Sault Ste. Marie, which is a Canadian city that borders the U.S. state of Michigan. He'd recently started a job there as a technician at the Ontario Forest Research Institute. The day before Stacy disappeared seemed to be fairly normal. Despite moving so far away from home, Stacy still made an effort to stay in touch with his family. On December 27th of 2005, Stacy spoke to his father on the phone. What they talked about that day has not been reported on, so I'm assuming it was just a casual phone call. The next day, on November 28th, Stacy would head to work. During lunch, he'd leave in his 2003 red Chevrolet Cavalier and drove to Seawell's Gas Bar on the Rankin Reserve, located at 436 Frontenac Street, which is part of the Batchewana First Nations of Ojibwe. At 1:12 p.m., Stacy purchased a pack of Players Light cigarettes from the gas station. After this, it's as if Stacy vanished. Now, I couldn't find exactly when he was reported missing or by who, but we do know that police were looking for him. Because just a few days later, on December 1st, Stacy's vehicle will be found abandoned on Connors Road in Duncan Township, which was 13.5 kilometers away from where he'd last been seen. Now, this road was actually heavily forested, it was in quite a secluded area, and it was described more so as a snowmobile trail. There was a few homes on the trail, however, towards the end of it, there was a dead end, there was also a loop, along with a river and off-road biking and hiking trails. Stacy's car was said to have been found disabled. However, there was no further elaboration on what that meant. No other evidence would be found at the scene, and the search was actually called off due to a severe snowstorm coming in. It wouldn't be until the spring of 2006 when a proper search would be conducted. But this search would span nearly a month. 55 trained searchers from Sioux's search and rescue team, as well as the Sault Ste. Marie City Police, would search the forested area around where his car was found. They were just trying to find any bit of evidence, or Stacy himself, which at this point, after they'd waited that long, I'm pretty sure it was more so going to be a recovery mission than actually finding Stacy alive, or at least trying to find some kind of evidence to what happened to him, because there was no way that this man, who was said to have last been wearing a simple sweater and vest, surviving a Canadian winter in the forest. The OPP would end up providing helicopters as well as snow machines in the search. 4 specialized OPP canine handlers were also brought in along with cadaver dogs as they scoured the area for 3 days around Connors Road. But still, after all of that, no signs of Stacy were found. Constable Bill Mackin saying that they were looking for any evidence that he was still there and that he was dead or that he walked out. Stacy was last seen leaving work wearing beige pants and a beige khaki vest over a blue sleeve sweater. He was known to smoke menthol cigarettes and was described as a thin man standing 5 foot 8 inches tall, weighing 155 pounds with brown eyes and brown hair. He was also balding at the top of his head. Stacy was also said to have psoriasis on his legs, arms, and back and took thyroid medication as well as medication for depression. It would also come out that in January of 2005, Stacy had legally changed his name to Luke DiLenardi. I want to guess that that was possibly because Stacy was a predominantly female name and he maybe didn't like that. Now, when it comes to theories, I feel like there's 2 theories that people talk about in Stacy's disappearance. Unfortunately, we have to consider the possibility that he unalived himself. He had a history of depression, he recently moved to a new place, he changed his name, and his car was found in a remote location where he could have walked into the woods or done something to himself. However, I feel like if that had happened, they would have found him. They would have found his body or something after decades and decades. Especially with how many people in that area hike and do off-road biking and different activities like that, you'd think that they would have found some kind of sign. Now, it was winter when he went missing, so I guess there's a possibility he could have been buried in the snowstorm and then they didn't see him right away, but you'd think once all of that melted, they would have maybe found something. I think we also have to consider the fact that maybe he did somehow, some way, decide to run away and start a new life. I wonder if police looked into anyone anywhere registering with the name Luke DiLenardi. Maybe he went across the border to the US and got a different passport or something and just completely started a new life. Why he'd want to do that, I don't know, but I think that could also be a possibility. I don't know why else he would go to a remote road like that and just leave, and then there was no signs of like a struggle or anything. But the fact that he made the decision to leave the gas station and ended up on that road in the middle of his work lunch break is something that's very strange to me. Like, he didn't wait to do whatever he did after work. It had to have happened in the middle of the day and also in broad daylight. What I really would like to know is the information that we obviously don't have, which happens in most of these cases that I talk about. I have questions like, how was he acting at work that day? Did he get into an argument with someone? Did something seem off? Or was he just having a normal, great day? We often see sometimes with people who are going to unalive themselves, they have a really great day that day. It seemed like his lunch break was going normal. He stopped and bought a pack of cigarettes. But where did he go after that? Why did he go somewhere else after that instead of going back to work? It also makes me wonder if they found any security footage of him. This all happened in 2005, and he was last known to be at that gas station, which was a major gas station chain. This wasn't like the 70s or 80s. You'd think they would most likely have some kind of security cameras up. Police have to have something like a receipt or footage to say that he bought those cigarettes at a specific time. And if they do have any footage of him leaving the gas station, it makes me wonder which direction he drove away from it. Was he going back towards work, or did he drive towards where his car would later be found? Also, there's no information on the state of his vehicle other than it was disabled. So what does that mean? It makes me wonder, was there signs of foul play then or a struggle? Whereas keys found in his vehicle, was the car on when it was found, or had it died and ran out of gas? I mean, maybe there's a possibility that he pulled over on that road to smoke a cigarette and, I don't know, go pee or something, and he wandered into the woods and an animal attacked him or something. But then again, you'd think there'd be signs of that because there was snow on the ground, so there would be blood or something against the snow. You'd think that would have been easily seen right away. But them calling the vehicle disabled makes me think that something nefarious happened. What that is, though, I don't know if we will ever find out. In March of 2005, 18-year-old Ashleigh Pettman moved from Grande Prairie, Alberta to Kelowna, British Columbia to live with her grandmother on the west side of the city. She was born to Rick Wilson and Betula Pettman. However, just 2 months later, on June 1st of 2005, Ashleigh would gather some belongings and get into an unknown vehicle of friends who arrived at her grandmother's house. After this, Ashleigh never returned home and was never seen or heard from again by family. However, for one reason or another, police believed at this time that Ashleigh had been living on the streets as an at-risk youth. However, the family heavily disputed that. Ashleigh had last been seen on June 1st, 2005 by family. However, it's thought that there was a sighting of her on June 5th in the area of City Park. Police have said that they've gone down every possible lead, yet still 20 years later, Ashleigh has not been found. Despite that, police also say there's no evidence to suggest foul play. But in my opinion, if someone disappears without a trace and decades later you still can't find them, they're not contacting family, they're not using their bank accounts, their cell phone, their social medias, and none of that, in my opinion, that's most likely foul play, especially if the person is underage. Or at least if someone doesn't have the means to move somewhere else and, just wipe themselves off the face of the earth because they don't want to speak to their family anymore or something. That normally makes me feel like something bad happened to them, but hey, that's just me. The issue with this case, which we see with many Canadian cases, is that there's just not that much information out there to the public, which makes it harder for people to spread the word and talk about those cases, especially Ashleigh's. Because we see so many of these cases happen and some of them blow up, some of them don't. And for one reason or another, there's not that much information on Ashleigh's case, so I think that's really why no one's talking about this, because there's clearly something wrong here. She got into a vehicle with friends that no one knows about, no one knew, and just vanished. We don't have a description of the vehicle. We don't have a description of these people, faces, names, nothing about them. We don't know how she knew them, how long she knew them, where they were heading that day. There's literally nothing, just that they picked her up and she never returned home. What's also strange is that we have conflicting narratives in this case. One, that Ashleigh was living on the street, which is what police were saying, and then the other where the family saying that no, she was living with her grandmother. There's also this narrative where she was actually moving out of her grandmother's house and then vanished, but then the family said that she was meant to come home, so it just doesn't make sense. In my opinion, I think police have a lot more information than they're saying. And I really truly feel like they should let some of that information out because it's been nearly 20 years now and no one's talking about it. There seems to be no new leads coming in, at least that have been publicly known, or at least ones that are leading to actually finding Ashleigh, it seems. But police are tight-lipped as ever. And I could really only find one article on her case, despite her family still being very active on her Facebook page that they created for her. And because of that, I think this is a case that truly needs to be talked about more. It needs to be out there more. If someone sees this, maybe someone out there knows something and they can come forward and say something. And since this happened not too long ago, it's not a case that's from like 40, 50 years ago, I think there could be footage of her out there somewhere. There could be footage of the people driving away with her or where they went. There has to be something out there. Someone knows something. So I'm hoping spreading the word on Ashleigh's case will hopefully bring something out. Ashleigh was described as 5'4", 95 pounds, with long light brown hair and green eyes. She was last seen wearing a white t-shirt and blue jeans. She had a tongue piercing and a tattoo of a Playboy-style bunny logo on her upper back. She would be turning 38 this year if she's still alive. 23-year-old William Gill was working at a finance company in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan in 1981. He was training to be an assistant manager before he disappeared off the face of the earth. William was said to love golf, racquetball, and had lots of friends and enjoyed a good time as most young men do. He was born in Regina and moved with his family to Saskatoon when he was in elementary school. From all accounts, William loved his job and he actually took care of his father who had Parkinson's. And from everything I've seen, he had no enemies. The night William disappeared, he left work at the Beneficial Financial Institution located at 310 20th Street East with his manager. From there, the two men went shopping at the Midtown Plaza and then headed to a bar in downtown Saskatoon called Jerry Brown's Country Palace, located at 301 First Avenue North. At the bar, they ended up meeting two women, which they spent the night drinking, dancing, talking to them, and by 11:30 p.m., they were all ready to leave. So William and his manager ended up being very courteous and walking the two women home to their apartment complex located at 714 Appleby Drive in the city's West End. And after this, I've seen two different stories. Once again, these cases where the stories aren't very straight. In one story, William ended up turning down a drive, deciding to walk home instead. In some newer articles, however, it was stated that he caught a ride home with a friend. Police would also end up reporting in news articles that William had not been depressed, he was also not drunk that night when he left the bar, and that he was looking forward to the upcoming holidays and Christmas. Either way, William was last seen alive outside of that apartment complex on December 21st of 1981. He would never arrive home, and he would never show up to work the next morning. William was always known to stay in contact with family. However, when that communication completely stopped, plus it was close to the holidays and no one could find him or get in contact with him whatsoever, his family began to worry, and they would eventually report him missing to police. His older brother, Randy Cook, saying in a newspaper in 1990, and I quote, "I don't think he's alive. I think someone's done something to him, but you're always wondering. There's so much uncertainty. You can never stop thinking because you just don't know. It's always in the back of your mind. You can't put it to rest. Maybe a Martian grabbed him. Who knows? It's the not knowing." End quote. Things didn't seem to be moving in William's case until 2006 rolled around, when police would announce that they identified one or more people who may know what happened to William, but they said they needed the public's help, saying that after re-interviewing 5 people who had come into contact with William the night he disappeared, there were 2 individuals who were not cooperating with police. But after that, there is virtually no information on William's case or any new updates. It's as if police found these people and then didn't get any additional information or any help, and it essentially went cold. William Gill is said to be 5'9", 162 pounds, with a slender build, brown hair, and wore dark-framed glasses and often sported a mustache. Someone out there knows something. Clearly, authorities had multiple persons of interest, yet they just couldn't get that evidence they needed. But clearly, someone out there knows something. In June of 1973, 23-year-old Theresa Pettit, known as Terry, and her 27-year-old husband, Ronald Yakimchuk, known as Ron, were last known to be leaving their home in Edmonton, Alberta to move across country and attend a wedding in Montreal along the way. Terry was described as an early feminist who had worked towards an engineering degree but switched to the arts after a year. She rolled her own cigarettes, drank scotch, and was a warm, bright person. Her husband was working on his teaching degree and was heavily into journalism and New Left politics. The two met when Terry was 18 and Ron was 23, getting married on July 25th in 1971 at the university's chapel. In 1969, Ron quit university and signed on with the Edmonton Journal as a proofreader. A friend saying, and I quote, "Ron was a typical farm boy from Andrew, Alberta. He had a terrific sense of humor, but he was quiet and unflappable. I don't remember him getting mad. He was a classic liberal New Left, everybody's ideal of what a son should be." End quote. However, I did see right before the trip, Ron had completed his degree, so I don't truly know if he quit university or not. The articles are kind of, again, they're older, they're kind of all over the place. But I read that he had finished his degree and ended up handing off his position at the Edmonton Journal to someone else. This is when Terry also gave her notice, and the couple decided that they were going to move to the Maritimes to find new jobs. They strapped a mattress to the roof of their 1959 Volkswagen Beetle so they could use it along the way. One friend making a bet with Ron that the old car wouldn't make it across Canada without breaking down because it was so old. But they were young and they wanted adventure. And the wedding they were going to stop at along the way was actually for an old colleague from the University of Alberta who they hadn't seen in 2 years, so they were very eager to get there and to celebrate and to see them again. Terry and Ron started their trip making good time, so they ended up visiting relatives in Brandon, Manitoba along the way. The last known contact from the couple was a postcard that was mailed by Theresa from Dryden, Ontario on June 12th of 1973. A one-word message of "Nya" was written on the card, a message to the friend who bet them their car wouldn't make it. telling him he'd lost. And this was sent to the friend who ended up telling them that their car wasn't going to make it across country because they had gotten quite far and they were having no issues. So she was basically telling him that he'd lost the bet. At this point, they were halfway into their drive to Montreal, and the weather reporters were calling for sunny skies and warm temperatures along the way. But sadly, both Theresa and Ron would never make it to that wedding. When they didn't arrive on time, their friends weren't overly concerned at first because they did know they were driving that old car. It probably had some kind of issue go on and it delayed them. Or they thought possibly they decided to make a detour and go through the US for a little vacation first. And once the wedding ended and they were still not seen, everyone decided to go back home and go back to work. But as the months passed and no one was hearing from Theresa or Ron at all, that is when they began to worry. A friend would actually end up bending the rules at their work, and they'd end up accessing the Unemployment Insurance Commission's computer to see if the couple was employed anywhere and making any contributions to their retirement or if they were drawing unemployment. However, the friend wasn't able to find any job or any payment out of it. Terry's parents were beginning to worry at this time as well. Her father saying, and I quote, "I reported them missing, but since they were adults, the police weren't interested at first. Then I moved to Fort McMurray, Alberta in September and got to know an RCMP officer who encouraged more investigation." End quote. So it also didn't seem like police were very concerned, again, because they were adults. They were moving across the country. Maybe they were just somewhere doing something, essentially. But thankfully, it seems like Terry's father met that police officer, befriended him, and then they actually ended up encouraging the other officers and the police to look into the case more and to press harder for them to. It would come to light that after that postcard was mailed in Dryden, the old Volkswagen would had to have carried Ron and Theresa up a series of 200-meter bluffs lining the north shore of Lake Superior. So one popular theory is that the car had gone off the road and they'd essentially gone into the lake and drowned, which would account for them, their car, and all of their belongings never being found. At one point, police would end up finding a pair of glasses on a remote road and they'd end up giving them to Teresa's parents to look at. However, nothing ever came of that, so I'm guessing they weren't Teresa's. After mailing that postcard, Ron and Terry would never file another tax return. They would never touch their joint bank account. They would never renew their driver's licenses. Those are all very bad signs. And back then, we didn't have cell phones and social media like we do nowadays. But those are the kind of things that you also have to look at. If someone's not renewing those things, they're not renewing their car insurance, they're not renewing their driver's license, anything like that, those are also very bad signs. Because if they are out there living their life, they have to still renew that kind of stuff to be able to live, to be able to drive their car, to be able to pay for a home, etc., etc. They need to be able to work, but none of that stuff was ever accessed again. What I really wonder is if police ever sent a dive team into Lake Superior to look in that area. I see on YouTube a lot where they do those sonars into the water and stuff like that. If one of those teams would go out there and look, if they'd be able to find their vehicle and if they'd end up being able to solve this case. Because if that can be ruled out that they didn't go into the water there, that opens up a whole plethora of other, roads of where this could go. If they maybe had driven a little bit farther and were ambushed somewhere, maybe they went to sleep somewhere at a rest stop and someone kidnapped them and then hid their vehicle somewhere on private property that's never been found again. There are other possibilities, but I think things like them going into the lake needs to be ruled out first, which I don't know if that's ever been done. Theresa was described as being a petite woman standing 5'4" with blue eyes and short blonde hair. Ronald was described as having brown hair, brown eyes, a faint scar over the bridge of his nose, and a mole on his shoulder blade. He was also wearing a braided wedding ring. I think the chances of Theresa and Ron being out there are very slim, but there's always a chance, I guess, some way, somehow. I don't know why they would just drop off the face of the earth with all of the friends they had. They seemed to be in great standing with everyone. They just wanted some adventure. They were in their 20s. They wanted to go out there, start a new life somewhere, get a new job in a new province. I don't see them just completely disappearing. I think the chances of that were very slim. If you have any information on Stacy, Ashleigh, William, Ronald, or Theresa's disappearances, I'll have the appropriate authorities down below that you can contact for each of these cases. But someone out there knows something in multiple of these cases and they're just not talking. Someone out there had to have seen something or has to have known something. On top of that, I truly believe that police should allow more information out on these cases because they happened so long ago. I think they could lead to more information and more tips coming in. Because if police truly do know certain individuals may be involved, if they have persons of interest, if they're not releasing that information, how are people supposed to send in tips about those people? if no one knows they're being looked into. And I think releasing certain information on these smaller, older cases could lead to them being solved faster. But my heart goes out to all of their families. I truly hope they will eventually get justice and that we will finally get answers for these 5 people. If there are any cases that you want me to look into and talk about, leave them down below and I will take a look at them, and hopefully I will be able to create a video on them as well. As always, I hope you all stay safe out there, lock your windows and doors, and I hope to see you in the next video.